back.
Yeah, mic check, mic check, mic check. Oh man, we are officially live. And let's go. Welcome into Kickin the Real podcast. I'm your host, Andy Diosa. If you're a first-time listener, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. If you're a multiple-time listener, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. This is exciting, man. I think I've said this in a prior episode, but the cool thing about starting this podcast is being able to talk about whatever I want. And I know this is kind of branded as a soccer podcast, but this will not be a soccer episode. So to the basketball fans, what's up? Long overdue. And number two is bringing on people that I genuinely just like to talk to, connect with, former colleagues, friends, and all of the above. So this one is it's very special because it's something that I had on my mind from the beginning. A great person to talk to in general, and he's here to talk some basketball with me. So I will introduce and get all of the behind the scenes of how Freddie and I know each other. But my brother Freddie Coleman, thanks for coming through the kick with me, man. How you doing?
Are you kidding me, man? I've been looking so forward to this, my brother Andy, because it's been more than a minute since we always had wonderful conversations, whether it was on the basketball court, we played pickup basketball, lunchtime run here at ESPN on the campus, or even our conversation outside of that. So I've been looking so forward to this, my friend.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, this is Freddie Coleman, one of the without any hype, one of the nicest people you would ever meet.
Thank you.
ESPN radio host, has been doing it for a long time, 2004, I believe. It's currently the host of Freddie and Harry. It's 3 to 7 p.m. on Eastern Time, ESPN Radio, Monday through Friday. Just a great person in general. But I will ask the first question I ask everybody, and then I'm going to get to the background because there is a nice story about how Freddie and I connect and how this all came together. But the first story I do like to ask everybody is just an origin story about like how you got into what you do. How did radio or working in media become a thing for you that just kind of blossomed into something beautiful?
It's funny you mention that, Andy, because I'd always thought that radio disc jockeys and personalities when I was growing up in Brooklyn, New York, they were just in a different galaxy. I just thought there was no way that those people who always brought such joy and information and great entertainment to me growing up as a kid in Brooklyn, New York, they weren't even on planet Earth. I never thought in a million years I would want to do what they were able to do or have the opportunity to do something like that or even be good enough to be in that kind of orbit that they were subsiding in. And when I went to school in Mansfield University in Pennsylvania, class of 1987, Mountie for life right here, I was going to be a political science major because I love the political process and how things happen, how things didn't happen. And it always has fascinated me from in the past and not just in the United States, but other countries as well. And a friend of mine, she wanted somebody to voice over a project for her. And I said, what is a voiceover? And she explained it to me and said, meet me at the school radio station and we'll do that. So I met her down there at our school radio station on the campus. And within 5 minutes of being around that environment, I went to the registrar's office after that, changed my major, became a mass communication major. The fact that I've had a chance to be a part of music radio and be a program director and be a music director, and now going on my 20th year working at a wonderful place known as ESPN Radio, where most people in our business, even here, don't even last 20 seconds. The fact that I've been able to do that for 20 years and go from that little kid listening to radio in Brooklyn, New York, to being a part of something special for this long of a period of time, and not just here, but just in my career, I know exactly how blessed and fortunate I had a chance to be a part of this. And I just wanted to keep on keeping on.
Yeah, man. Like you said, it's special. I think when you do get a taste of it in the beginning and you're around certain things in the media landscape, it kind of just opens your mind and you're like, oh my God, I could do this. It seems like so much fun. So like you mentioned, the run has been incredible. And I've said this to Freddie years before, like since I've been working in sports for so long, I try not to consume a lot of sports content when I'm either not working because it does get draining after a while. You need to find, and that's kind of like a disconnect. But the way Freddie does radio, man, it's fresh, it's entertaining, it's all of the above. So I've caught myself listening to Freddie on many occasions and like, man, this is just a fresh way to approach it because the landscape, sometimes it's tough and there's a lot of clickbait and stuff like that. But Freddie keeps it OG as he always does. So I love it, man. It's been a pleasure to just follow along and obviously see you be great. And like you said, that's a crazy run, unprecedented for a lot of people. And especially at a place like that. So good for you, man. We're always fans here and always proud to see that.
Thank you so much by that. And believe me, I always tell people, if you're surrounding yourself with terrific people, you're always going to rise and shine. And that is something that has been a hallmark, not just of my career here, Andy, at ESPN Radio, but anywhere I've been and anybody I've had a chance to encounter. You always try to find the good in many people. And even if the good is not there, you don't allow their bad to affect your good or what the good is going to be around you. So I think by always having that mentality and learning that from my mom and dad and other people that have been in my life, that has been able to have me sustain whatever pitfalls have come my way, whatever peaks and valleys that I've been a part of. By having that kind of mindset around, I know that no matter what happens, if you have that kind of support system around you, you're never going to fail. You're not going to succeed at everything, but you're never going to feel like a failure, no matter what the end result is going to be.
Man, Freddie dropping gems right off the top of the episode. No, nothing par for the course, man. This is just what he does. And Freddie dropping gems. Freddie also drops dimes. I wanted to tell this story. If you are watching on YouTube, I have this shirt on that I
Uh-huh.
dig out of the closet. That definitely doesn't fit me no more. Only some real ones have this shirt. It's an intramural championship shirt from ESPN. Now, for those that don't know, I used to work at ESPN for 5+ years in Bristol, Connecticut, at the headquarters, and that's where I had the pleasure to meet Freddie. One of the cool things, like Freddie just said, is being around great people, talented people, and obviously in the sports world, you learn so much at a place like that. But probably, I would say one of the coolest benefits that we had is the ability to have an open gym, to play basketball 2-3 times a week, where we just had a gang of people that were just super talented out there playing. And I always said to Freddie, like the fun part to me, obviously, is playing the basketball and getting a workout. But the fun part was always just talking, either before the game, in between, or after. And then they had these intramural leagues set up, and all the people that would play pickup would be on different teams. And it was a blast. So I wanted to bring that up because every time I do connect with Freddie is on Twitter or any messages, that we always talk about like the good old days. And I don't know if I'm biased, but I know the groups that we played with in those years were really good, and a lot of people have since moved on. What do you have to say? Reminisce on that, and is it still running? Are you still out there doing what we used to do, man?
Well, put it this way, it's still running, but I'm not running with those bulls when it comes to me, because when you get a chance to be my age at 59 at the end of this year, they get younger, faster, and stronger, and I get older and slower and weaker. I don't want any part of that as far as that goes. But one of the things that always keeps me going, I always think back to those times, because everybody looked forward to playing either with each other or against each other, whether it was the lunchtime pickup or nighttime pickup at times when the summers would happen and the daycare center was able to be open. They kept the center open in the summertime and the interns would come through. But even those days where it could just be like a simple Monday, 15 guys roll in, 18 guys roll in, and everybody would be busting on each other right away. And everybody always went after each other, and it was always good natured. It was always fun. Even when you lost, you lost the guys that can play. And even you believe that you should not have lost that game, you could take it because you knew the guys you were playing against were guys out there that were going to be natural born killers on that basketball court. And even when things kind of jumped off, where, when you get a lot of testosterone in the building and things get heated because you have a highly competitive atmosphere, which has been a major factor of success when it comes to ESPN, why they've been around so long, that competition is going to breed better competition. It's going to force you to raise your game. Those were the things I always treasured and valued the most, that even when those games were over, guys were there to pick each other up. Guys were there, hey, if you have something going on at work, what can I do to help you out with? What can I do to make that better for you? It was always great to have that kind of cross-pollination where it just went beyond basketball, involving the guys we played with or the guys we played against. I can't tell you how many times that guys would go to different departments. Hey, I heard you need help with this. Here's somebody you can get in contact with. You need some help with that. Those kind of relationships and those kind of situations, Andy, are always going to matter to me. And as much fun as I had playing basketball and getting our sweat on and getting our groove on or trying to get our groove on, those are the things and the situations I'm going to treasure more than anything else, because those relationships, no matter where people have gone, whether they stayed here or moved on, those relationships are still lasting long and still long lasting, that people can always look back and say, I always got somebody I can rely on because of somebody I've met working for ESPN, and I have a chance to see those guys 2, 3, 4 times a week playing basketball.
I couldn't have said it better. Like you said, man, there were some natural born hoopers in there. There was some of the run of the mill, just going to have some cardio sessions and put some rebounds down, which is what I was always doing. But like I made some of my best friends on that basketball court, man. Like to this day, still talk to a lot of people that we hooped with, and it is very true. It's just it's one of those things that's very special that we were able to experience in that time and in the unique. I always bring that up, and it was just if I could think back and enjoy something again, it would be that, because man, it was a blast. And one of the fun things was, like I mentioned, we walk in and we're just having conversations. A lot of it is life conversations, and a lot of it is sports conversations. And Fred is obviously a brilliant mind that talks sports around the calendar or whatever it may be. But basketball is naturally a thing that we gravitated towards and talking towards. So I wanted to do an NBA playoffs episode. It's probably long overdue because it's moved on quickly, but the schedule is intense. But that's why Freddie's here. We're gonna talk some NBA playoffs. I know my listeners have been wanting me to talk some basketball, and have a lot of conversations off the mic that I need to put out in the air so people don't think
Mhm.
I'm just a Celtics homer, even though we're gonna win the championship anyway. So let's start with Mavs Wolves. Everybody
Yeah,
had the series being over. We have a game 5 tonight as of this recording, and it's interesting because the Wolves ended the I don't want to say ended, but stopped the Nuggets, which I think that was more of a matchup thing that it was good for them and they actually paired
absolutely.
up well against Denver. But every series is different, and we're seeing now against the Mavs like they were up against it. There are a few different things that are getting exposed, and Ant is kind of still just going through the trenches and learning at a young age what it takes to be at this level. But they did not get swept, which shows a lot of resolve in the team. And now there's a little bit of, hey, is this series really over, or could the Wolves actually do something and push it along? So, what do you make of this game 5? What do you make of this series? And is there any chance that it does get extended a little longer?
Well, put it this way: when you're the Dallas Mavericks, the pressure is still on the Minnesota Timberwolves, Andy, to find a way to make sure this season is not going to be over. But if you're the Dallas Mavericks, you better make sure it does not get to a game 7 because all the pressure will be on you after having a 3-0 lead and then you blow a 3-0 lead and you have to play a game 7 on the road. All that pressure is still on Minnesota right now, but it's going to completely shift if we get to a game 7. I think this series will be over in 5. But if it's going to be over in 5, the return of Derek Lively is going to be major for the Dallas Mavericks because his absence was noticeable. Not being there in the middle, getting those rim runs and dunking the ball in the head of Rudy Gobert, or making plays as a playmaker when they would blitz a double team on Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. He was always in the middle and always made the correct play for the Dallas Mavericks. And his win protection was necessary because now Daniel Gafford is not the only person doing that for the Dallas Mavericks. So him being back in the lineup, and he's questionable going into game 5, but him being there is going to relax everybody, and Dallas will not have to play small. But the big factor for me for Minnesota Timberwolves is what Carl Anthony Towns are we going to see? Are we going to see the guy we saw in the first 3 games that looked like that he was just committing dumb fouls and taking dumb shots all over the place? Or are we going to see the same guy that we saw in game 4 that even though he fouled out, he was completely proficient in the second half, where he goes from 5 points in the first half, he scores 20 in the second half, and he's 4 or 5 from the 3-point line. And he really attacked the basket, mainly because only one guy he had to worry about, Daniel Gafford, without Derek Lively being there. If he can recreate that, we've seen what kind of confidence he continues to get from Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards never gave up on Carl Anthony Towns. When other people did that, Anthony Edwards said, dude, I believe in you. I know you're going to get this done, but you got to trust in yourself and not just try to go your own way. The minute we saw that in the second half from Carl Anthony Towns, it reduced a lot of pressure on Anthony Edwards, where he did not have to do everything. It reduced a lot of pressure on Naz Reid that he didn't have to make up for the lack of scoring when it came to Carl Anthony Towns. If we see that Carl Anthony Towns in game 5 and we see the same game 5 that we saw from Kyrie Irving in game 4, then we're going to get a game 6 over the weekend involving both of these teams in the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, and like you said, if this goes even 6, I think the pressure starts to shift a little bit. Like the Wolves,
Yep.
a young team, obviously, like you mentioned, Cat is a big part of what happens there in Lively playing or not, but as well. But I think Ant, like I mentioned, like Ant is kind of getting to the point that he's like, I don't need to do everything. I have a talented enough team that I need to, like you said, give that confidence to Cat and be like, yo, you're a dog, a great basketball player, but needs to kind of pick and choose what role he's playing at what times because we know he's a great shooter, but they don't
Yeah.
necessarily need you out there throwing threes up the whole time. They need you to do other things that are going to be efficient enough to get Ant the ball, to get Ant a little bit of relief, and also kind of include Rudy in the mix. So that's a talented Minnesota team. Like they're a very talented team, and there's an ability there that if they do win game 5 and push it to 6, this could get really mixy. I'm not going to say it's going to happen because this Mavs team is also really good, and I think that they've shown throughout the postseason they could do it. A little bit of diversity. They have
Yep.
2 generational talents and scorers, probably 2 of the best I've seen in a while with the basketball. So it is going to be interesting. But that Wolves team, there's something to be said for them, just in terms of what they could do if they're on their game, especially if Cat is producing the way he did in game 4 in that second half. It could get scary, but I'm hoping for it to be extended a little longer, just out of
Yep.
pure fandom. And
Yep.
obviously, we want to watch more basketball, so that'd be great. But I don't need it to get to game 7. That's going to be that'd be stressful for everybody involved.
Well, and the stress part about that is no matter when, let's say if it goes to game seven, Andy, like you mentioned, I'm with you. I picked the Mavericks to win this series in seven anyway. So if I get a game seven, they win, then I'm going to look like a prophet. So I'm going to be very, very selfish as far as that goes. But I'm with you in terms of a basketball fan. If it gets to a game seven, no one is going to turn away from that. Everyone's going to see, man, is it going to happen? Will the Minnesota Timberwolves become the first team in NBA history to be down 3-0 and come all the way back and win a series? And what is that going to look like for the Dallas Mavericks having to deal with that kind of blowback that they're going to receive if they blow this series? But whoever wins this series, if it gets to a game seven, it's going to be the best thing for the Boston Celtics because now there's going to be 10 days that the Boston Celtics have not played a basketball game. That means they allow their minds, their bodies, and their spirits to be right because all the pressure is still in the Boston Celtics to finally break through and win a championship. And hopefully for the Celtics and their fans' sake, because believe me, as a New York Knicks fan, I should be morally opposed, rooting for the Boston Celtics. But I would love to see them win because this way Jason Tatum can be left alone by people. I don't know exactly what they want from him. We talk about playmakers in the NBA. He's one of the top 5 playmakers in the NBA. We talk about a guy that can defend at both ends and play basketball at both ends. He can definitely do that. Even when you look at game 3, when they're down by 18 points, he made so many different plays for Al Horford and Derek White and Drew Holiday and Jaylen Brown, but yet people kept doing a yeah, but with him. I hope that he's able to win a championship. This way, that conversation and that narrative has to go by the wayside. That narrative has to go the way of Disco and the Dinosaur if they're able to win a championship because finally no one can say, yeah, but with him, or you can't do it, or you don't have the stones to do it. He does have the stones to do it, but I think people don't realize, Andy, how tough it is not just to win an NBA championship for that organization, but to stack playoff series and playoff series and playoff series on top of each other. When he's been in the Eastern Conference Finals 5 of the 7 years that he's been in the National Basketball Association. So if this series between Minnesota and Dallas gets to a game 7, that's really going to benefit Boston because now you're coming off a tough series like that, playing a well-rested team who's had a chance to really combine their energies and say, we know the task is at hand. We know we have to do. And now we're going to be the more rested basketball team, which means we're going to be better served if the series goes to 7 games in the Western Conference Finals.
This is why Freddie's a pro, because the next conversation was going to be about the Celtics. It's going to be a real serious conversation about the Celtics, like he just opened up, because there's so much narrative behind this team that I just fail to understand. And I've been having this conversation. And me as a Celtics fan, I think a lot of people think I'm coming from a homer standpoint or a fandom standpoint, which I'm as far away as a sports fan that you could get with that. And
Right.
it's really interesting to me how things have changed in terms of the Celtics, because I still think that the playoffs are amazing. I still think that there's some part of the season, there's merit in the regular season, and people are just so quick to devalue things now and say,
Yeah.
oh, it doesn't matter unless you win a chip. It doesn't matter. So you're going to tell me that the last 5 or 6 seasons don't matter for the Celtics, that they constantly have been one of the better teams in the East, that they constantly get to the conference finals, that they were in the NBA finals and lost to a very good Warriors team that had done it already multiple times before. Like this is all part of the process. And I think that the reason why I have confidence in the Celtics this postseason more than any time is they did it everything the right way. They put the team together the right way.
Yeah.
They drafted the right way. They saw what holes they needed to patch up. They got Drew Holiday, which is going to be an amazing piece to have in the final series, especially against Dallas, if that is the case. And there's just so much that the Celtics have done right, and it always falls back on Tatum for some reason, which I still fail to understand. Because, like you mentioned, when he's in his bag, one of the best scorers in the league right now, there's no question about it. Footwork is probably bar none. Like, he has all of those essential skills that make him such a great basketball player. But at the same time, of course, there's why do you shoot so many threes? Why do you settle sometimes? And you could go and pick flaws on any superstar in the
Yep.
league. You could just throw a
Hmm.
name on and pick the flaws. But for me, it's the Celtics cruise through the East. And I understand that it wasn't a hard path. And I understand that Jimmy Butler gets hurt and Donovan Mitchell gets hurt. To me, nobody in the East was beating them this playoffs,
Yep.
healthy. Like, listen, I said it from the beginning. The only 2 teams I did not want the Celtics to see, and when the bracket played out, I'm like, God is on our side right now, were the Knicks or the Pacers. Because I was like, those 2 teams, once again, there's value in the regular season. If you did watch regular season basketball consistently, you realize that the Knicks and the Pacers were always giving Celtics trouble this year. On
Yep.
top of that, the Celtics are very infamous for playing down to their competition for some reason and not beating teams that are, let's say, shorthanded or whatnot, the way they should, because you expect that from a dominant team. But let's peel it back. This team was in first place all year. So I say, of course, if Jimmy Butler doesn't get hurt, if Donovan Mitchell doesn't get hurt, these are not 5-game series. It's not maybe not a sweep if Halliburton doesn't get hurt.
Sure.
But end of the day, the Celtics were going through the East. And that was that's my thing is like I'm not a big like championship or bust guy, but this season more than anything because of the way things have rounded out, getting to the finals was like the bare minimum for this team. Now, like you said, the pressure is on for them to take that next step. But I do want to ask this about the Celtics because it's all a
Hmm.
narrative thing, right? And they
Yeah.
say about Tatum and about Brown and about this and that. Like it's just like the Wolves present a different matchup for the Celtics because of the size difference. But let's say it is a potential Celtics Mavs final, which it does look like right now. It's it's a great matchup. I think it'd be great basketball all around. But if you look at it from a pure basketball standpoint, which a lot of times it doesn't play out that way, but the Celtics have the ability to defend players like Kyrie and Luka. And when I say that, don't think I'm saying they have ability to stop them because nobody
Yes.
has not given talent to stop somebody like that. But they have the ability to throw bodies around and shift around and switch when they need to. And if they get Porzingis back, am I naive to think like I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but I'm like they should have the upper hand and should be the favors and should have the advantage in a series like that.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. If anything, I think the Mavs will pose a bigger challenge to the Boston Celtics than the Minnesota Timberwolves because, like you mentioned, when you have Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving and the Dallas Mavericks, they're really long defensively. When you got P.J. Washington, Derek Lively, as well as Daniel Gafford, so they can kind of match bullet for bullet when it comes to the length of the Boston Celtics. But when you have two guys in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I'm a big believer that a good big man is better than a good little man any day. And I'm a Kyrie Irving fan, but having to have those two guys and Derek White, who's 6'5", or Drew Holiday, who may be only 6'2", 6'3", but has very long arms, and he's one of the great playoff defenders in the backcourt that we've seen in the last 15 to 20 years. You can throw those different elements at those guys, and all four of those guys can guard both of those guys when it comes to Luka Doncic as well as Kyrie Irving. But yet the defensive principles are really good that you, even if you beat them off the dribble, their coverages are so good to take away what you want to do. I go back to game one against the Indiana Pacers where Tyrese Halliburton was able to get past his defender and Derek White and get to the rim after Jaylen Brown tied the game at 117. But Jason Tatum was so good coming over the last second that he made Tyrese Halliburton change his mind. If that's flipped around, we know that Luka Doncic will continue to go to the basket, or Kyrie Irving is going to continue to go to the basket, but it becomes a tougher shot. They're not going to let you have a chance to do that to them where they're going to force you to bail out. I can't wait to see that we get a Boston NBA Finals. I still think we're going to get that. I don't think the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to win 4 in a row against the Dallas Mavericks. I can't wait to see how Jason Kidd, who is as good of a coach that we have in the NBA, will try to combat length when it comes to the Celtics on defense. You can try to design plays, but tall is tall and short is short. And you got tall guys that can defend and have that intelligence to play basketball to do that, you make it very, very hard on the team, no matter how gifted of a scoring option that the Dallas Mavericks have with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm like, listen, man, I know there's a narrative of like, oh, Kyrie going back to Boston or maybe Porzingis going back to Dallas, which is cool. The storylines and finals are always a fun thing. But I'm a
Sure.
huge Kyrie fan. Like I love Kyrie, and I know his like he has an ability with the rock that many don't. So he's gonna get his. Luka's gonna get his. But I think just the overall matchup, you look at it and you're like, all right, man. And this is what I want to debunk right here. And this is the part that people think, oh, like I'm just being a homer. Like people, the
Okay.
biggest argument right now is people saying the Celtics are not battle tested. And I'm just like, where does this narrative come from? Like, I understand, right? I understand that these were easy series. Now, I don't want to say easy, easier than they should
Yes.
have been series this season, right? But
Right.
at the same time, this is a Celtics team that ran through the East this year, like I already mentioned. This is a Celtics team, as we just talked about, has been on these big stages for how many years now? And the Celtics team that a few years ago was in the NBA Finals against a really good Warriors team, which this is what I also want to add. I tell people the thing about the Mavs is you're going to need more than Luka and Kyrie, right? Like these are
Yep.
generational talents, and they'll score 60 combined. And we've seen that in the playoffs already. They've scored 60 combined and lost games against the Clippers, against the Thunder. Like it's happened. And I say that because the same way the Warriors beat the Celtics a few years ago, Steph was going ballistic, which is unstoppable. But who killed the Celtics? Andrew Wiggins,
Andrew Wiggins.
who those players were the people that helped the Warriors get that chip. So I'm like, to say that the Celtics are not battle tested because of the road they had to take this season is absolutely absurd when they've been to the finals, when they've been to these big stages. They've played Jimmy Butler in the playoffs. They've played
Mhm.
Joel Embiid in the playoffs. They used to have to play LeBron James in the playoffs when Tatum
Right.
and Brown were young. They played They played Giannis in the playoffs. They played Kevin Durant in the playoffs. How much more battle tested do you need? Maybe this team in itself, you could say it's not that battle tested. But I think once again, the culmination of what they did, how they put the team together, they are battle tested and they know exactly to get to this point what needs to happen. I'm glad that you brought it up off the top. I think at this point, Tatum doesn't really care much about
He
the narrative,
doesn't.
about what
Yeah.
they like. They know they got to win, and if that means Jaylen Brown being the leading scorer, if that means Al Horford, Derek White, Drew Holiday, anybody, that's all that matters to them. And like, just where does that narrative come from? Why is it that way? Is it just a disdain for Boston sports and not wanting to see them win, or is there something else behind that that I'm just not understanding?
Well, the narrative comes from the fact they have not won a championship, and people see the gifts that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown bring to the table, and they're thinking, okay, why haven't they won? But why don't we have the same conversation with Luka Doncic? Because a couple of years ago, Luka Doncic got to the Western Conference Finals, and they upset the Phoenix Suns, and they beat the fool out of them in Game 7 before they had a chance to lose in the Western Conference Finals. We don't have that same conversation regarding Luka Doncic the same way we're having that conversation when it comes to Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. So for the life of me, I think it's because they have not won a championship. They've gotten close. And you mentioned 2 years ago. We're talking about a team in terms of their battle scars. They haven't lost to scrubs when it comes to them. They lost to Miami Heat team with Jimmy Butler's one of the all-time great leaders. I don't know if he ever win a championship, but guys seem to rally around and want to play harder with him on their basketball team. They lost to a Golden State Warriors team. They may wind up having 4 Hall of Famers on it in terms of with Steve Kerr going to Hall of Fame as a basketball coach, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, potentially Draymond Green, and Andrew Wiggins did his thing, and Kevon Looney did his thing. Other guys were able to step up after the Celtics had a 2-1 lead. We also talk about a team that was battle-tested in this series. Even though it was a sweep, they should have lost Game 1. The Indiana Pacers let them get away. They were down by 18 points in Game 3, found a way to come back and win that ball game when Al Horford hit 7 threes, and they were down by 9 points in the second half, even without Tyrese Halliburton, and found a way to win that basketball game. So when people say that they're not battle-tested, well, apparently they're not paying attention to the whole picture. They're just looking at what they want to see, what has jumped out to them. And the one thing that keeps jumping out to people is this team has not been able to break through. And I'm a big believer in that. If not now, when? If not this team, then who? Because there's nothing guaranteed. There are no guarantees you're going to get back here next year. And even if you win a championship, there are no guarantees you're going to go on the run. Plenty of people thought the Denver Nuggets would be in the NBA Finals. So what happened to that basketball team losing the Minnesota Timberwolves? The Celtics know we have to live in the moment. It can't be about what happened before. It can serve as fuel, but we can't allow past events to determine exactly what we're going to do in the present. And they've done a really good job of that so far, ignoring that outside noise and going out there and winning 64 games in the regular season and only losing 2 games to get to the NBA Finals.
Yeah, and I think that's the part. Those are all facts, and I agree fully with that. And that's the part that I think people are overlooking is the fact that they're talking about everybody that they have to play that got injured, as if the Celtics didn't lose one of their biggest pieces on offense right away and have been able to just lose 2 games on the way to the final. Like the loss of Porzingis is something that people are not even bringing up because you expect this team to be so good. And I was at Game 1 in Boston. I'm like, it was incredible. Like they got off to a 12-0 start, and I'm like, oh, this is what you expect. This is a Celtics team that we have been seeing all year. That like, let's go, like first place in the East. Like we're not playing no games, and then you're like, oh man, like this is getting tricky. And like you mentioned, Halliburton, like, that's a good Pacers team, man. Like these are all talented teams they're playing against, with or without stars, and it's a playoff series. Like none of these games are going to be easy. But the resolve of this team is what has changed now. Like this team a few years ago might have lost games like that, and they probably should have lost that game. Like you said, the Pacers did their best job to keep him in it. Jaylen Brown hits an absurd shot from the corner. But what I'm sticking with from that game is when overtime hits, they knew exactly what they needed to do. And Tatum was like, hey, he had an awful shooting game. Don't stop. You're the star of this team. Go at it. Go to the basket. Then he hits a big shot. They win the game. So it's like that resolve is them going through those phases in the past to know what they need to do. And I think that they've been able to do that in a great way. And if Porzingis does come back healthy for the finals, I think it is going to be a huge benefit for them. But yeah, it is funny. And for the Lakers fans, because I'm in LA now, and there's always a lot of back and forth. This is why I wanted to have a conversation with somebody who is not a Celtics fan to know that
exactly
saying stuff that's crazy. And listen, I would be mad too if I drafted Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram instead of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown.
Thank you.
I get it.
Thank you. You can play revisionist history like Lakers fans will try to do, but the bottom line is you had a chance to take a guy like that in Jason Tatum and think how that franchise could have been altered if you're the Los Angeles Lakers. You got to get a LeBron James and Anthony Davis. You have those 3 guys in your front line. That solves a lot of problems when it comes to the Los Angeles Lakers, but they fell for the banana in the tailpipe and decided to take the local legend known as Lonzo Ball, who can't stay healthy, even though he's a gifted passer. And the Celtics understand this as well. They know their margin for error is very, very slim, but they've been able to overcome that margin for error by just going out and being who they are. They're going to be a 5-out, 0-in team. Their best post presence is going to be when Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum get to the basket. And if you don't keep them from getting to the rim, they're going to make plays. And if you are able to do that, they have the ability to find other people and spray it out to their shooters, whether it's Derek White or Al Horford and definitely Drew Holiday, Holiday, who's made some big time shots so far in this run leading into the playoffs. But the best cold blooded killer that people do not talk about enough is the growth of Joe Mazzulla as a head coach. Because last year when Jason Tatum was struggling, he might have gone away from him thinking, well, I got to go to somebody else. This year's like, I don't care if you're struggling. We need you to win these games. We got to have the ball in your hands. He did not take the ball out of Jason Tatum's hands, even when he was struggling. And we saw a guy go 2 for 10 shooting in the second half of game one, for scoring 10 points in overtime and beating the Indiana Pacers. That has been an underrated aspect, that Joe Mazzulla's growth as a head coach and trusting in his team and not going away from them when things get adverse. That's been a big, big factor by the Celtics in the NBA Finals and may win it all when it's all said and done.
I agree, and it's a great shout. I mean, Mazzulla got thrusted into that position. It was tough, and like it was out of nowhere. And I'm glad you mentioned Jason Kidd too, because Jason Kidd has done a great job, a phenomenal job of coaching that Dallas team. Like Dallas is a team I watched a lot throughout the regular season because, like I mentioned, I love Kyrie, I love Luka, and to see their progression throughout the year, like they've. And the thing about the Celtics that people say there's inconsistencies, that the Mavs have had those throughout the season as well, and the Mavs trailed by 18 in the game 3, I believe it was too. So like there's very much so similarities between those teams. But Jason Kidd has done a phenomenal job, and I think to see Kyrie kind of fall into a role where he understands what they need to do, and obviously a player that knows what they need to do to win a championship.
Sure.
Phenomenal job coaching by Mazzulla and Kidd, and I think not to discredit the Wolves, but I think if that is the matchup, it'll be amazing basketball for all of us. And I do want to mention, the players have been great, and there's a lot of teams that were good and that could have made a run or that people were cheering for. And I want to start with the Knicks because there's a few teams that got eliminated, but that have great potential, that have outlook. So I'll just ask for quick thoughts and maybe outlook for a few teams, starting with the Knicks and what you think of what they have going on, because that Brunson, Hart, DiVincenzo trio, man, they were doing something. And I think it started elevating everybody else on that team's basketball. And it was a lot of fun to watch.
And don't think one second Jalen Brunson doesn't know that, because people are looking at him wondering, why are you going to leave $114 million in extension money on the table? But he also knows that I need a Julius Randle. I need an OG Anunoby. The core that we have right now, and Isaiah Hartenstein, we got the tools that can play any kind of style. You want to play a knockdown bar brawl, we can do that. You want to play up and down basketball game, we can do that as well. He clearly knows that if he's counting that much against the salary cap and the luxury tax, then that means an OG Anunoby goes somewhere else. And you need that guy, because we've seen what they've been able to do the short time they were together in the basketball court when it comes to a Jalen Brunson, a Julius Randle, and an OG Anunoby. Now you're not extending so many minutes with Josh Hart or Dante DiVincenzo, which makes them fresher basketball players as the regular season goes along. The fact that he's given the New York Knicks fans a chance to have some hope to say, hey, if everything stays together, we can get a little healthier. We can be that team that can challenge Boston, that can be better than Milwaukee, that can keep our distance maybe between us and Indiana Pacers, even though the Pacers beat our Knicks in a 7-game series. All of a sudden now you look at a team, you don't say, do they have championships ability? Do they have that championship mentality? You can look at that team and say, yeah, they got it a little bit. And if they can stay healthy, they can make a serious run at the Eastern Conference, no matter who may be there for the New York Knicks in 2024 and 2025.
I believe that. I wish that team was healthy. Them healthy against a team in the conference final would have been absurd. I wanted it so badly. It would have been crazy. What about the Thunder? The Thunder, I feel like maybe besides the Wolves, have kind of the biggest potential of teams that kind of got bounced, and a young team that has to go through it. But they have the pieces there, and the Sam Presti madness of picks and trades finally worked out. What do you think about the Thunder?
You better get them now, because they're only going to get better and better and better, because we talk about Anthony Edwards being that young leader for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Well, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is not far behind him with the Oklahoma City Thunder, because they really rally around that guy. What they really need, Andy, is a Drew Holiday like what he's been able to do for the Boston Celtics. You need that veteran that's been through it, and if he has a championship ring or NBA Finals appearance, then he can show exactly what can be done, or when to say something, when not to say something. And I think Drew Holiday's been fantastic at that, not just on the basketball court, but from what I heard, he said in the locker room to these guys, and they really rallied around that and been able to follow that lead. If you're Oklahoma City Thunder, you got the pieces in place where you have this young talented basketball team, but they can get like a Drew Holiday kind of presence, or someone who's been there as a player that can really help them, like Sam Cassell has helped Joe Mazzulla and the coaching staff of the Boston Celtics. If you can find somebody like that, then you are able to take that next step, and you'll be better than what we saw in the playoffs where they lost to the Dallas Mavericks, because the Mavericks had a Kyrie Irving to steer them through some tough times when they lost the first game of the series. The Oklahoma City Thunder did not have that guy when things flipped to the other side in favor of the Dallas Mavericks.
So facts. Here's a team that's kind of forgotten about, and I kind of want to mention it because it seems like so long ago they were playing basketball. The Milwaukee Bucks, like when they got rid of Griffin, They were really good, and then Doc Rivers comes in, and I don't know what happens, but you have a freak literally in Giannis. You have a cold killer in Dame. Like, what needs to happen there for that team to kind of be that championship caliber? Because there's no way you have two talents like that and let it go to waste.
Well, that's a really good question because it just never seemed to fit the minute Doc Rivers got there. And I wonder how much they were expecting Damian Lillard to be that kind of Drew Holiday replacement. And they're not the same player. We know that Damian Lillard is a gifted scorer and a gifted point guard, but it seems like he and Giannis don't mesh the way that they should. And that's going to be the best answer to a question I can't wait to find out. How will Doc Rivers find a way to incorporate these two to be the kind of guys that can play off each other and not, okay, it's your turn, now it's my turn? Because in Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, they don't do that. When somebody's cooking, that's where the ball goes. When somebody else is cooking, that's where the ball goes. When they're both cooking, they feed off of each other. And we've seen that a little bit more Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown as well with the Boston Celtics. I want to see exactly what kind of answer Doc Rivers is going to find out to try to make sure that these two generational kind of talents, when it comes to Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo, find a way to mesh, because they're able to find that way to do that, then everybody's going to relax and feel a lot better. The more that that's there, that has not been a problem solver when it comes to Doc Rivers, then everybody's going to feel that, and that will not be good for the Milwaukee Bucks.
What I'm starting to understand is that maybe the Drew Holiday move was a good move for the Celtics. I don't know, just throwing that out there on the list. I'll bring it to the two LA teams. Obviously, there's interest here for a lot of my friends and listeners. The Clippers. I mean, is it just time to shake things up and kind of keep it moving with what you can? Like Paul George, generational talent. Obviously, Kawhi, if he's healthy, he's great. But we've been asking that if he's healthy question for a while. What style look for the Clippers?
Well, if you're the Clippers, you can't afford to blow it up because you got a brand new arena that you're moving into. And it's kind of really hard to do that if you don't get the right kind of capital in return. If you decide to move on from Paul Pierce and Kawhi Leonard's not going anywhere, and you just signed Ty Lue to a 5-year, $70 million extension, stay as your head coach. So you can't afford to blow this up. The Clippers, here's the problem with the Clippers. We always wait for that other shoe to drop with this basketball team. And time again, Andy, they never let us down, whether it's a Kawhi Leonard injury or you acquired James Harden, which the minute that they brought him in, I said, well, they're not winning a championship because that's not going to happen. So as long as you're the Clippers, you've made this bed. Now you have to deal with it. You can't afford to say 1 year later that we got to move on from this when you're moving into your own arena, that you don't have to share with anybody else. That is going to be your palatial castle when it comes to the Clippers. You can't afford to blow that up going into next season. You got to give this another year to see if it's going to work, and maybe even another year after that. And then if it's not working, then you have to have some hard decisions that are going to have to be made. And Steve Ballmer is the guy paying the checks, and I'm sure he wants a lot more return on his investment based on what he has not seen so far.
Big time. I went to actually 2 Clippers Mavs games in that first round, and
Mm-hmm.
it seems so frustrating to watch. They're so good one day, and then they're down by 30 the other day, and it's like, it doesn't make any sense when you have a team that talented. But like you said, man, you kind of have to ride it out going into the dome and see what happens. But I feel like Ty Lue, phenomenal coach, he deserved the extension there, but there needs to be some return on investment, or some hard conversations are going to be had there. And then lastly, with the Lakers, I mean, the LeBron thing is just it's just the overcasting cloud. Anthony Davis actually had a decent
He really did.
postseason for the games that they were in there, but what do they need, man? Because it's like every year it's this player, that player, this player, and they end up in the same boat. Clearly, the Nuggets are not a good matchup for them, which is a different conversation. But what do the Lakers do? Because I think they have a lot of questions that need to be answered.
Well, to me, they need a point guard, to be completely honest with you, because you can't have LeBron James being your point guard all the time. It's got to be somebody else that can get them organized, because more than likely they're hiring J.J. Redick as their head coach, because I know they've interviewed James Borrego, the former coach of the Charlotte Hornets, and I know other guys have been on their radar. The guy they're going to hire is J.J. Redick, but the guy they need is a point guard, and they need somebody that can organize and get everybody orchestrated and make that work. This way, LeBron plays more off the ball, Anthony Davis involved in more pick and rolls. That's what they really, really need. The problem with that is who they need. They need somebody about 28 years of age. It can't be a rookie point guard, and it can't be a veteran at the end of his tether when it comes to the NBA career, because at a certain point, that guy is going to break down. They need a Rajon Rondo type for this basketball team that guys will look at and say, no matter what happens, that guy's going to keep us on the same page. That guy's going to hold us accountable. They don't have that person right now. That's not to say LeBron James can't do it, but he shouldn't have to be the only one doing that. You need somebody else that people looking at locker room and say, hey, we got LeBron, we got Anthony Davis, but that guy's going to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do. And unfortunately, that kind of person is tied with their basketball team. They're not going anywhere. Or the person that they really needed was 5 years ago, and now it's 5 years later. Like a Chris Paul, in my opinion, would be perfect for this basketball team, especially the way that they play. But since that person is not out there, then everything's going to fall on LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And when J.J. Redick becomes a head coach, and the West keeps getting younger and better, while the Lakers keep looking to pitch and patch and mix and match, and hope that's going to be enough for them to at least have a run in the playoffs, much less trying to win an NBA championship.
Yeah, it's tough. And like you mentioned, the West is every year it just seems to be getting better. Now you have Wemby out there, and what the Spurs are going to be able to do in the future, it's absurd. But you know that Chris Paul cannot go to the Lakers. David Stern left that somewhere in the bylaws. And
exactly. That's been grandfathered into Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner. Andy, you're right about that.
One last question, Freddie. I'll let you go. I think this is probably the most important question of the whole podcast: is the state of the women's game. And I say that because I was at Staples Center when Caitlin Clark was just here. I won't call it the other name of the arena. It's still Staples Center here. And it's so funny to me that like it got filled up, and there's all these different conversations around Caitlin Clark and whatever. You could have those conversations like till you're sick. And then I realized like there was a lot of people there to see other players, and I was mostly excited to see Aaliyah Boston, because I'm like, Aaliyah Boston in South Carolina was so good. And I was actually with Jackson, who you know as well, is one of my good friends here that lives in LA now. And I'm just like, yo, like we take a step back, there are so many good basketball players in the WNBA, and it's just like a correlation of how much better the women's game has gotten on the college level, and probably even under that. Like this year's NCAA tournament was not even close to being as like in comparison with the men's. It was just way better from the beginning. And then you look at the WNBA and you see these stars everywhere. Asia's killing it. You have Sabrina, who has had a success, Brianna Stewart. Then you see the newcomers and Angel Reese. It's just so refreshing to see and see the boost that people are just not just watching because like, oh, let's watch women's sports. They're watching it because the quality is good, because the players are good. Just talk to me about the state of the game and how much it's grown and how cool it is to see.
Well, the women's game is what the men's game used to be, and that is stars are not leaving after 1 year and not going to college at all. We can't wait for Juju Watkins to get out of USC and go to WNBA, but I don't mind waiting for that because what she's been able to do. Look at the kind of power structure that Dawn Staley has built with the University of South Carolina. We get a Camila Cardozo, but Fournier is going to be in the league in another couple of years, and she was a star as a freshman for South Carolina. Paige Becker is what she's done for the University of Connecticut, and if AZ Fudd can stay healthy, those are two potential future stars of the WNBA. Where they are right now, Andy, is where the men's college game used to be, where guys would stay 2 and 3 years and you got used to seeing them. Once one and done happened, I'm not going to say that's killed college basketball, but between that and the transfer portal, that hasn't helped at all. Meanwhile, you got so many players that are staying there. Or if they go to a school, they'll leave after 1 year and stay at that school for 2 years. Like an Angel Reese when she left Maryland, went to LSU and won a national championship. So the Caitlin Clark effect is something that we cannot ignore, and we should not ignore that. But that has brought more people to see other people in the women's game that say, hey, that person's really good. Or I want to be a fan of that team. I want to be a fan of that person. That's what the men's game used to be. And unfortunately, now that horse in the fields, the men's game is never going to be like that again. But the women's game, that's why we've seen this uptick and this surge up when it comes to women's basketball, because when you see them on TV, you know they're going to be there. And if they're not going to be there, let's say they graduate and they go to WNBA, you're going to follow them to see exactly that's going to happen. And the WNBA has done a great job making sure that exposure is going to be there. With Cameron Brink is on a podcast. He made Kawhi Leonard laugh more than anybody's ever had in his NBA career. When you have those kind of people and personalities, the way it used to be in the men's game, that's why the women's game is going to continue to see a surge up, because people get used to these personalities. They want to see these personalities, and they want to be more invested in what they're going to do, whether it's in college basketball or whether they get to the WNBA.
That's it, man. And I'll say, being here in LA, like I fully take advantage of seeing these players live. I saw Juju about 6-7 times live last season. From the first USC game I went to the last one, I'm like, this team might actually do something. Obviously winning the conference, but like making the tournament run that was unprecedented earlier in the season when Juju was kind of just like her shooting. But yeah, it's incredible, man. It's trending in such a great way. And if you have the chance to get out and see some of these stars live, do so. Freddie, my brother, once again, I appreciate you. We could do this for a long time because we've done it for a long time. So
no doubt.
Nothing but great to catch up with you, man. Please check out Freddie and Harry on ESPN Radio. By the time this episode drops, Freddie might actually be live on the radio as you listen to this. So go check it out, man. Freddie, once again, man, thanks for coming through, and wish you nothing but the best always, my brother.
My pleasure. God bless you, Andy. Always great to catch up with you, man. Much love as always. Can't wait to do it again soon.
Yes, sir. God bless, brother. Appreciate you.